Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A theme that's been running through these midterms for days is the idea that Democrats can run as a check on Trump. They promise congressional oversight, investigations, subpoena power. My next guest, Tony Schwartz, co-author of The Art of the Deal and a friend of the beat, says there's another side to this entire coin, predicting if Democrats fail to win back the House or the Senate, Trump will actually feel more emboldened and as a result move to expand his power, doubling down on the attacks on Obamacare, climate change regulations, quashing any investigations that are still going, including, of course, the big question about Bob Mueller. If the opposition party is cleared out for the entire first term, there could be an increasingly dangerous, sympathetic right-wing media machine.
How frustrating would it be if you're the President of the United States and every single time you turn on the TV, on most of the channels, they're misconstruing what you say? It has to be frustrating, and that's why he's saying it's fake news. And he's saying if you don't want to be called the enemy, then get the story right, be accurate, and report the story the way that I want it reported.
Tony is here. He's also the author of The Way We Work Isn't Working. Tony, if Republicans do hold the House, you say Trump could actually get even worse than this.
Well, I think unequivocally he will get worse. I don't believe that's going to happen, but I sat at 7 o'clock in Hillary Clinton's victory party on election night and still thought that wouldn't happen. So I'm holding my certainty, but I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does happen, he for sure will be emboldened to move more in the autocratic direction that is his deep instinct.
His instinct then is fundamentally more reactive than the typical analysis would say, because he depicts himself, and many people go along with that, that he's wildly running around doing things. You're saying that actually there is a Trump 1.0 of the first 2 years, and he might be worried about losing, which is, we've just been covering that, the evidence of that and where they're putting him. But if they hold the House, he'll say what to himself?
Well, you know what he'll do. He'll blame it on Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. He'll say it wasn't about him. He'll lie about what actually happened. He'll do all the things that Trump usually does. That actually isn't going to serve him very well if that happens, because there's no question that we're going to have a very different climate in this country if he loses. But I think underneath all this, I spent the day at a conference full of uber capitalists run by the New York Times. The conference was run by the New York Times, and the last person I listened to was Peter Thiel, who's a very right-wing supporter of Trump's out in Silicon Valley. Facebook investor, member of the board. It dawned on me that this is what's going on underneath all of this, Ari, is the failure of capitalism, the failure of the free market. I've said this before to you, but any strength overused becomes a liability. And think about what capitalism is. It's all about accruing as much as you possibly can for yourself. It's survival of the fittest. And the very core of capitalism is more, bigger, faster is always better. And what we've got is a runaway train. So we've got 8 people who control as much wealth as the bottom 50%, the poorest 50% of the world. I mean, how could that not be creating fierce resentment? We understand that resentment, but I also think what it's created is an emptiness in the souls of the people to whom the money has accrued.
And doesn't that also touch on a point that has become so difficult to even say out loud? Because when you talk about economic anxiety in Trump voters, many people hear that as a cover for the uglier things that have animated part of that movement. So certainly some of it is not economic. And yet, when you look at a 2016 where Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump went as far as they went with totally different versions and different records, but both seemed to tap into the idea that a lot of people in this country were hopping mad at both parties' leadership, the traditional Democratic Clinton wing of the party, for selling out to the bankers apparently that you got to spend some time with today.
Yes. What they're angry about is that the system has stopped working. It worked, and it's not working for them. And what's happened now, as Trump begins to throw anything he can at the wall in a feeling of desperation, because he is one scared son of a gun about this potential loss. He does understand the implications of it, and he's frightened by it. So the reason he's doing these outrageous things, the reason he's sending 15,000 troops down to a location where there's no enemy, is because he wants to do anything he can to deflect attention, to raise the anger of his base. And what he realizes is that this could turn very, very dark for him. And so he needs those kind of conflicts. And the real conflicts that he had, he should have had his hands full last week protecting the country from real threats, and instead he was minimizing them. He puts bomb in quotes while talking up a caravan that's far away. Think about this when we talk about Trump. Think about the fact that he is the 1/10 of 1%, a guy who inherited $400 million. And yet his presidency is a continuing expression of this feeling of emptiness inside that he needs to fill from outside. He wants the love. He wants to do the self-dealing so he has more money. And it isn't working.
It is Friday, the 2nd of November of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes. Just a reminder, the French 77s are available in the virtual world if you virtually need one right now, because it is the weekend. And this is the time when we colloquially refer it to as, well, the shit hits the fan. Apparently, I think the number is up to 15,000 troops. He may be going to 20, 22,000. Do I hear 25? Do I hear 25, 25,000, 25,000 going once, 25,000 going twice. Oh, we go to 30,000 troops along the southern border of the United States, along the Mexican border. And anybody even looking at Iraq is going to get shot. Because that's premeditation. How did we get here? I'll tell you how we got here. We had the audacity of hope to elect a black president. And they told us that we would be punished, and we would be punished severely. And we elected a black president. They said, okay, you get fascism now. We warned you. You had a nice thing going. It was too bad you had to give it up. We warned you. Except for the fact that they had put into place the mechanisms in which a Donald Trump could become president of the United States. And I'm looking at you, Federalist Society. I'm looking at you, Cato Institute. I'm looking at you, the Koch brothers, Liberty University, and all the other, right-wing hate groups. I do have an audacity of hope, though. And what is that audacity of hope? That the institutional mechanisms of what it is that makes up the United States will stop this fascistic takeover of our country. Well, at least stop it from occurring any more than it already has in the last 50 to 60 years. Because it didn't begin with Trump. And we do know that the ship of state carries a tremendous amount of inertia, and it will keep moving even after you've changed its course. It's going to slip and slide a little bit. Okay, well, it is Friday, and I assure you, I have not been hitting the French 77s yet. Also, no more than 2, okay? I mean, if you have a third one, you may be pinned to whatever reclined position that you may be in. Or partially reclined, even. That has happened. Okay, well, the caravan continues to move forward. Ever so slowly. And when I mean forward, they're kind of moving a little westerly right now. They haven't actually moved north for about a week. They've been going in a more westerly direction. Still about 1,000 miles away from the border, and I don't know. Instead of shooting any caravan member that's throwing rocks at our military at the at the Mexican border there along Texas, if they're able to throw a rock from where they are, sign them up to a Major League Baseball contract, because I don't know anybody can throw a rock about 800 miles. I would sign them up. But we know what they mean. It's not the military that Trump is giving, is giving his entreaties to. It's the right-wing militias that are going down there, and some who have been there stealing National Guard materiel. Oh yeah, that's been happening. Right-wing militias are still stealing military equipment from the National Guard, and now they're going to try to do it from the U.S. military. I think there may be some firefights with our U.S. military and the right-wing militias. That is what Trump has wrought. What's on the rest of the menu today here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, that was Art of the Deal co-author Tony Schwartz at the top of our email, basically saying that Trump is terrified of midterm losses. But if the Dems fail, it's going to get worse for us, because he will then become emboldened. I actually surmise that it doesn't matter whether we win or lose. There is going to be a dark turn, darker than what it is now, and it will be a fight. What about the weeks that it takes before the Democratic Congress, should we actually win, when they finally take their oath of office? I mean, what about that interim? What's going to be pushed through then? And what are the Republicans going to do? Oh, yeah, I don't know if they can get a few more judges, a few more dozen judges in various levels from appellate, district. Maybe they'll get lucky and get another Supreme Court justice before Democrats are sworn in. I don't know. They might. Well, on the rest of the menu, then, GOP lawmaker promised that giving away billions to Foxconn would bring immediate innovation and thousands of jobs. So Foxconn built a factory of thousands of robots. Now that's immediate innovation. And the jobs are all going to robots. They fulfilled their promise. And so did the GOP lawmaker. A Pennsylvania GOP official called the cops on an interracial couple canvassing for a Democratic candidate in a gated community that, I should add, they had permission to be in. And the catch-22 that just stripped Native Americans of their votes in North Dakota is the result of a Supreme Court that hates voting rights. They do. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a San Francisco 49ers cheerleader took a knee during the national anthem in the game against the Raiders last night. Uh-oh. I think she's going to lose her minimum wage job. And the Tree of Life terrorist pleaded not guilty to federal hate crime charges and other offenses, as Pittsburgh's Jewish community buried 3 more of its dead. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. with mere days left until voting day, make sure you're registered to vote, and register to vote if you're not. There are still states in which you can register to vote. If there's early voting in your state, please early vote. In many states, or in some states, today is the last day of early voting because you can't vote over the weekend, apparently. But vote early if you can. Get other people to vote early if you can. And on voting day, go vote if you haven't, and take some people with you. And if you've already voted, take some people to go vote. Be a bus driver. In fact, go to Dodge City, Kansas, and I don't know, get a van or a bus that carries 30 to 40 people and start ferrying them to the polling place outside of town. They got 13,000 people there, 61% Hispanic, and it's a mile away from the nearest bus stop. They're making it as hard as possible for Dodge City to vote. And I wonder how it is in other parts of Kansas. And while we're mentioning it, how bad is it in other parts of the United States? If you can drive people to the polls, please do. We have to pull out all the stops because we know they are. And we know who they are with a capital T. That's right. So then there are links at our homepage at netrootsradio.com in which you can do most all of that, not vote, but you can find out where you can. Please just vote. Please scroll to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and do check out her shows on Saturday at the Table with Kelly Lincoln, beginning at 3 p.m. on the West Coast. That's 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky May, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, and it is a full-packed Power Hour. Yes. Now, if you would look to the leftish of our homepage, at the bottom of our homepage, at netrootsradio.com, that is the Contribute Donate button over there. And do please become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. We have various tiers, continuing donation, just even a small donation, a cup of coffee, even like the inexpensive cup of coffee. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We are, of course, on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Check us out over on Facebook and other social media platforms. And pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Yeah. Alrighty. So, this first article here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, it looks like Wisconsin State Representative Dale Kooyenga promised that giving away billions to Foxconn would bring in immediate innovation and lots of jobs, thousands of jobs. Well, it looks like it's a boondoggle, just like his Democratic rival warned. You know, we always do. And no one believes us until, the damage is done. And even then, they still won't believe us. A lot of them won't. Wisconsin gave away billions to Foxconn, thanks to support from Republican state representatives like Dale Kooyenga. But now it's clear that Wisconsin Democrats sold their taxpayers a bill of goods that won't create the jobs that were promised. A scam that will take decades to pay off. Now, Kooyenga was a key vote in Governor Scott Walker's drive to secure an eye-popping $4.1 billion in cash subsidies and tax credits for Foxconn. Right there, the name ought to give you a little bit of pause. Con? A Taiwanese electronics giant supposedly in exchange for thousands of new manufacturing jobs. Well, there are. They're all done by robots now. After he gave Foxconn the green light, Kuyenga said the deal was part of an effort to develop a generation of engineers, managers, and workers and create additional careers in Wisconsin. But, as reports, instead of a factory filled with workers building televisions, Foxconn instead will have the manufacturing done by robots. They fulfilled their promise. They just never said it was going to be people. Thanks to this scam, Wisconsin taxpayers are now on the hook for a staggering $1,774 per household, and it will take at least until 2050 for taxpayers to recoup their losses. It's not a Democrat doing that now. The disastrous deal also exposes a lie we've told over and over, that the cupboard is bare, that we don't have enough money for our schools or our roads or our health care. Matthew Rothschild, executive director of the Good Government Group, Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, told The Verge. But then, when a company from Taiwan comes knocking, all of a sudden there's $4 billion of taxpayer money to shell out. We could have helped a whole lot of small businesses for that kind of money. Yeah, but you wouldn't have been able to skim as much off the top either. And that's what they're doing. Think of all the other kickbacks they're going to get too. And I'm sure there's a finder's fee somewhere. Walker and his fellow Republicans, like Kuyenga, should have known better, since Foxconn has a history of failing to deliver on its promises to governments about creating new jobs. Instead, they bought the scam hook, line, and sinker. Kuyenga even sent out a special note to his constituents hyping the deal. But once the deal was exposed as a dud, Walker didn't even mention it when he announced his re-election bid. And now Walker's out there calling Obama the biggest liar in history because he promised that you wouldn't have to give up your health care plan if you liked it. And Walker's saying, yeah, but, if you really like that junk healthcare plan that didn't cover you, he took that away from you, and you wanted that junk plan that didn't cover you. You would pay money into it, and when it came time to be able to collect on maybe some medical help, and you couldn't get it, but you still loved that plan, and he took it away from you. He is a liar. He gave you a plan that actually covered you at a much cheaper price, by the way. Obama was the biggest liar in the world. Scott Walker has no place to tell anybody about lying, because taxpayers are left on the hook for the governor's gamble, Scott Walker's gamble. And Kuyenga bears blame as well. He was so eager to make the deal that he ignored numerous red flags about it that were visible from the start. And now that he's indebted to his constituents for decades, he has the nerve to ask them to reward him with a promotion to the state senate. And Walker thinks he's going to be governor again, too. Travis Geddes of Raw Story brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An interracial couple was met at home by police after a local Republican official confronted them for spreading socialism in her Pennsylvania neighborhood by campaigning for a Democratic candidate. Oh, by the way, Fox has been going on the air today calling Oprah a socialist leftist. Oprah Winfrey, a socialist. Oprah Winfrey is a self-made, I would say billionaire possibly, at least. Self-made, has more money than Trump, certainly. And they're calling her the socialist. It's almost like they think socialism is a bad word that everybody's going to be afraid of. Well, I guess if you're a lizard brain racist who drinks the the whatever, they call it Kool-Aid. And it's unsweetened, too. It's bitter, bitter, bitter. They drink it. And it makes him even more racist and even more mad. Yeah, socialist. Amanda Kemp, a visiting scholar at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, said she and her husband were allowed entry to the Bent Creek community in Manheim Township. The voter that they were initially going to see was not home, and she and her husband determined none of the gated community's rules specifically prohibited canvassing, so they drove to the next name on their list of voters. Now Kemp, who is black, said a white woman with gardening shears called out to them. What are you doing here? You can't do that here. Yeah, you can't be an American citizen. You can't get people to do their civic duty. We're in a gated community. We're protected from all that little stuff that all the little people do. The couple explained that they were canvassing for Jess King, a Democrat who is challenging first-term U.S. Representative Lloyd Smucker. And Kemp said the woman became loud and aggressive. I hate Jess King, the woman said, according to Kemp. She's trying to take us to socialism. You can't do that here. Now, Bent Creek, which was built in the 90s around a country club and golf course, has been listed as one of the wealthiest 1,000 neighborhoods in the U.S. and is nearly 90% white. And you would expect that a woman living in that kind of community would have a much more, educated accent. But I'm making a point now, aren't I? And I don't mean to color a whole geographical location with, a broad brush. But there are parts of Pennsylvania that they do consider south of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm just saying. Well, the woman who was later identified as Elizabeth Duffy Johnson, a member of the Republican Committee of Lancaster County and Smucker campaign volunteer, you can rest assured she's been canvassing in that gated community for Smucker. Really, I think that if you canvass for Smucker, you might get yourself into a jam, and yeah, the pun was intended. All of this is private property. You can't be in here at all. I'm calling the police. Well, they had permission to be in there, by the way. So she started to dial, and Kemp and her husband left and called campaign volunteer headquarters to report the encounter. And then Jess King later called her. They decided to go home, and a police car pulled up about 5 minutes later. Well, the attorney for the woman who harassed the couple in the gated community, she has a lawyer, okay? He's right on it. Said that this matter is about trespassing. The volunteers from Jess King's campaign entered private property and became aggressive. They were asked to leave and refused, so the police were notified. Aggressive means that you had permission to be there, told the white woman you did, and now you're uppity. And that's aggression. Kemp and her husband remained baffled by the situation, but she said racism is more than simply yelling the N-word. There was an undertone, Kemp said. Her attitude really reinforces racial attitudes about inequality. Go a tad over getting into our break, but it is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. And, the French 77s have been poured. And, if you sip just a little bit, maybe it'll just calm you down enough to take your time, and that's what we're doing. Ian Millheiser from Think Progress brings us this final offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Senator Heidi Heitkamp won her 2012 race by less than 3,000 votes, in no small part due to support from Native Americans. And not long after, North Dakota's Republican legislature passed a law that effectively strips many of these Native Americans of their voting rights. Yet, according to an order handed down by a federal judge yesterday, this voter suppression law cannot be challenged prior to next week's election. The practical impact is that numerous Native Americans will not cast a ballot, and a Democratic senator may lose her seat as a result. Feature, not a bug, in this reporter's opinion. The voter suppression law requires voters to present an ID at the polls which lists their residential mailing address. It's a devious scheme because residents of many Native reservations live in homes without an official street address. Slate's Mark Joseph Stern tells the story of one voter whose street is listed as unknown to in a street database, so for these voters, it may be impossible to obtain the ID they need to vote. In April, a federal trial court blocked this law in April. Okay? Noting that at least 4,998, I would say that's 5,000, but okay, otherwise eligible Native Americans and 64,618 non-Native voters currently do not possess a qualifying voter ID under the new law. The trial court's decision was stayed in late December, however, by a panel of 3 appellate judges. Both of the judges who voted to reinstate the North Dakota law are Republicans, I bet, from the Federalist Society. The sole judge in dissent is a Democrat, and there are no Democratic judges coming through the Federalist Society. Let's be clear about that. The 2 Republicans argue that North Dakota's law must remain in effect because of a 2008 Supreme Court decision siding with an Indiana voter ID law established that a plaintiff seeking relief that would invalidate an election provision in all of its application bears a heavy burden of persuasion. Thus, to challenge this particular law, lawyers seeking to block it had to identify specific plaintiffs who were especially likely to be disenfranchised by this law. Bear in mind that the appeals court handed down that decision in late September, forcing voting rights lawyers to hunt for plaintiffs that would meet this narrow criteria. So it's okay for the judges to hand out this thing in late September, a little more than a month before the election, okay? They could change a previous court decision right before the election if a Democrat looks like they're going to get elected. And as soon as that criteria is met, it's just too close to the election. Now, we can't have that. In an order handed down Thursday, Judge Daniel Hovland concluded that it is highly important to preserve the status quo when elections are fast approaching. Well, how about the status quo of that voter suppression ID law is not valid for this election? When Republican judges make it harder to cast a ballot shortly before an election, they weren't stopped. But now that voting rights plaintiffs want to restore their voting rights, suddenly it's an insurmountable barrier. You can't do it right before the election. All right, let's get to our break, and as we mull that over, we will, of course, return and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, still scary after 40 years. After several forgettable and downright terrible sequels of John Carpenter's campy, low-budget 1978 horror classic Halloween, the franchise has finally hit gold again with director David Gordon Green's fresh interpretation with the original title. Picking up 40 years after the debut, the audience learns what has since happened to both killer Michael Myers and his most memorable would-be victim, Laurie Strode, played once again by the iconic Jamie Lee Curtis. The years have not been kind to the latter, and to the credit of the screenwriters, this is one of the few times that a slasher film has ever acknowledged the long-term stress and psychological damage of being a survivor of such violence. In Laurie's case, her obsession with trying to stop Michael by any means necessary has taken its toll on her relationships with her daughter Karen and her now teenage granddaughter Allison. However, Laurie's problems go well beyond her estrangement from her family when Michael escapes while being transferred to a new psychiatric facility and decides to return to his old stomping grounds of Haddonfield, Illinois. His rampage through the neighborhood of not-so-smart teenagers provides some much-needed thrills and chills, but the heart of the movie isn't so much the graphic violence, but rather how survivors and would-be victims fight back when the odds are against them. It's especially noteworthy that in the end, it's 3 generations of women who attempt to take down the crazed killer, who seemingly will stop at nothing, and at times seems downright unstoppable. Without spoilers, this Halloween delivers what a well-financed 2018 horror movie should. Plenty of scary with a healthy dose of girl power, which is refreshing without being forced. This is truly a Halloween in the era of Me Too. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Is anti-Semitism in America on the rise?
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
That is how our Civil Liberties Minute from June 2018 began. And now, following the murders at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, we're going to replay the rest of it. Comparing 2017 to 2016 shows, according to the Anti-Defamation League, a nationwide increase of anti-Semitic incidents of 57%. That's the largest percentage increase in a year since ADL began keeping records. The 2017 data show a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incidents in schools and on college campuses. 2017 was the first year since 2010 when there was a recorded anti-Semitic incident in every one of the 50 states. And comparing 2017 to 2015 shows that the number of incidents of anti-Semitism in America has doubled. This spiking in anti-Semitism, as summarized in a recent New York Times article, is attributable to the effects of social media and the emboldening of extremists, all exacerbated by the divisive state of American politics.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The Washington Post fact-checkers have been working overtime in the last few days of the 2018 campaign season, and they've found that the president has been lying even more than he usually does. In the first 9 months of his presidency, Trump made 1,318 false or misleading claims, an average of 5 a day. But in the 7 weeks leading up to the midterm elections, the president made 1,419 false or misleading claims, an average of 30 a day. That adds up to a total of 6,420 claims through October 30th, the 649th day of his presidency. This according to the Fact Checkers database that analyzes, categorizes, and tracks every suspect statement uttered by the president. He has greatest hits. 120 times he had falsely said that he passed the biggest tax cut in history. 80 times he's asserted that the U.S. economy today is the best in history. And 74 times he has falsely said that his border wall is already being built. Trump took a break from his incessant rallies on Thursday to give what was billed as a big announcement on asylum policies from the Roosevelt Room. But it turned out to be more like his typical campaign speeches. He said he would sign an executive order next week that would restrict asylum rules to close the door on the Central American migrants and refugees now trekking here through Mexico. He also said U.S. troops he's sending to the border could fire on migrants if they threw rocks at the soldiers, something Pentagon rules don't allow. When asked if the military would open fire, he said, "I hope not."
Them firing us? Could you see it?
I hope not. I hope not. It's the military. I hope there won't be that. But I will tell you this. Anybody throwing stones, rocks, like they did to Mexico and the Mexican military, Mexican police, where they badly hurt police and soldiers of Mexico, we will consider that a firearm. Because there's not much difference when you get hit in the face with a rock, which, as you know, it was very violent a few days ago, very, very violent. That break-in, it was a break-in of a country. They broke into Mexico.
CNN's Jake Tapper fact-checked the speech in real time.
Honestly, I could spend 3 hours doing this, but just a few items here. First of all, the president said that asylum seekers, once they're picked up, they never show up in court. And then he said something about 3% of them show up in court. According to the Department of Homeland Security, 76% of people who are picked up and given a court date do show up. So that was false. He talked about how there were an estimated 20 million, possibly 20 million undocumented immigrants in this country. Actually, according to his own administration, the number is about 12 million. He said that they had started building the wall. No, if you're talking about the concrete wall that President Trump had talked about on the campaign trail, no, they have not started building the wall. There has been some improvements to fencing and things along the border, but the wall itself that President Trump talked about, they have not started building that. He said Republicans were in unison when it comes to the issue of immigration. Actually, that's not true. In fact, so many Republicans in the House defected on a very conservative immigration bill. They couldn't get it through the House of Representatives. He had this whole thing about how the child separation policy that he got in so much hot water over was a continuation of the Obama policy, and then they ended it. That's not actually what happened. It gets technical, but let's just put it this way. The Obama's, the administration and the Bush administration had policies where children could be separated from their parents. It did happen, but then the Trump administration gave orders to exacerbate that policy, make it worse, and that's why there was the controversy that was ultimately reversed. Those are a small number of the issues that the president said talking about this that were not correct. There are many more, and I'm sure fact checkers are going to be hard at work.
Despite all of Trump's lies that have been cataloged, he told ABC's Jonathan Karl that he really tries not to lie.
Have you always been truthful? Well, I try. I mean, I do try. I think you try, too. You say things about me that are not necessarily correct. I do try, and I always want to tell the truth. When I can, I tell the truth.
At a rally Wednesday in Missouri, the president called the concept of birthright citizenship, something enshrined in the 14th Amendment, a, quote, crazy lunatic policy. On this, the last weekend before Election Day, candidates are pulling out all the stops. In Georgia, that means Oprah Winfrey knocking on doors and rallying for gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams.
I'm here because I want you to remind others of the power. And I want to make it very clear to all the press, everybody, I'm not here because I'm making some grandstand because I'm thinking about running myself. I don't want to run, okay? I'm not trying to test any waters. Don't want to go in those waters. I'm here today because of Stacey Abrams. And I'm here today because of the men and because of the women who were lynched, who were humiliated, who were discriminated against, who were suppressed, who were repressed and oppressed for the right, for the equality at the polls. And I want you to know that their blood has seeped into my DNA, and I refuse to let their sacrifices be in vain.
On this final weekend before Election Day, please remember to vote.
You get a vote, and you get a vote, and you get a vote.
And that's what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. Please remember to vote. The future of the nation depends on it.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. For the 27th year running, the U.S. was singled out by the UN General Assembly on Thursday, condemned by 189 of the UN's 193 countries for its continued embargo of Cuba. Only Israel joined the U.S. in rejecting a resolution that chided Washington for the embargo's adverse effects on the Cuban people. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Perea had more critical words to describe the U.S. policy.
It is an act of aggression and an act of economic war which disrupts international peace and order.
Trying to turn the tables on Cuba, the U.S. introduced 8 amendments, each of which condemned the communist government for human rights violations. But if the U.S. hoped forcing countries to confront Cuba's grim rights record would dampen criticism of the embargo, the gambit failed, and only Ukraine voted to stand with the U.S. and Israel. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley said the U.S. didn't mind being in the minority.
It's one more time that countries feel they can poke the United States in the eye. But you're not hurting the United States when you do this. You're literally hurting the Cuban people by telling the regime that their treatment of their people is acceptable.
Peter Schwab, a professor of political science at Purchase College, said global criticism of the U.S. embargo isn't likely to go away.
Trump has so alienated the European Union and European countries and Latin countries and African countries that I don't think he or the United States should expect any support for hardening the embargo or hardening attacks on Cuba.
While most Americans favor ending the embargo, Schwab thinks Cuban policy in general has fallen off the political radar, especially as Florida's Cuban voting bloc loses sway. In the meantime, the embargo will likely continue, and so too will the UN's yearly charade. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, folks, and the French 77s have followed us in here because we already had some in. But they might have been imbibed a little bit beforehand, and we had to make up for it. So there's some more for you. It is a virtual world, and any possibility is possible. We always like to begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 57 degrees Fahrenheit. And it looks like we will be about the same as we were yesterday. We didn't shoot up into the low 70s as they had forecast. We really only made it to the mid-60s, and we should be there again today, about the mid-60s. Unless they're wrong again and we fall into the low 60s. But I think we'll be about the same. Overnight lows have been in the mid to low 40s and will remain so through the weekend. Small chance of rain. There is mist in the air, though we do expect showers on Sunday. And then another big storm coming in at the end of the week next week. So we always want to look forward to that because it is fall back weekend. That's right. You get an extra hour of sleep, and Trump gets an extra hour to rage tweet. Yeah. It always has to be balanced out now, doesn't it? Okay, so don't forget, when it's 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, change it back to 1 a.m. Or before you go to sleep, whatever time that is, set your clock back 1 hour. Okay, so once again, small chance of rain through the weekend. There is mist in the air, and so we may have heavy mist to light sprinkles. And until we get those showers on Sunday, oh yes. And don't forget, turn your clocks back. Winds are light and variable out of the east and will also remain so throughout the weekend. Ragweed pollen still remains as the leading pollen that is affecting people currently, and that is rated low. The air quality index is in pretty much the middle of the good range at 25. Actually, not so much the middle. It's getting up towards the upper end of it. I apologize for that assessment. But the fall daytime UV index is rated low, and that's green, because that is a daytime UV index of 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.23 inches in the region. Visibility is down to 4 miles because relative humidity is up to 91%, and that's why it's misty, not quite a sprinkle. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 51 degrees and sunny. Paris is 54 and sunny. Rome is 65 and partly cloudy, though they do have a weather advisory, and I'm opening it up right now, and come on. And they have disruptions due to thunderstorms. So if you're in the Rome area, take care. Infrastructure and the electrical grid could be knocked out today. Okay. Kiev is 49 and fair. Kabul is 44 and fair. Not fair to the wedding parties that are going to be killed by drone bombs this weekend. Hong Kong is 67 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 59 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 and fair. San Francisco, California is 53 and sunny. You know, they were 80 yesterday. Wow. And New York is 69 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, with a wind advisory of a high wind watch. Hold on to your hats, New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Reuters, looks like an anonymous worker bee at Reuters, by the way, brings us this first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. A San Francisco 49ers cheerleader was pictured kneeling during the United States national anthem at a National Football League game yesterday, which was last night, actually, against the Oakland Raiders. I think maybe the 49ers have found a quarterback. I want Cap back. But this kid, Mullins, played pretty damn good, I got to tell you. We'll see how he comes up on a second attempt. They're, beginner's luck sometimes, huh? Well, the San Francisco Chronicle was among several media outlets that published a tweeted photo, by the way, of the unidentified woman on her right knee before the game against the Oakland Raiders at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. The newspaper said the team did not comment on the matter. Now, kneeling during the anthem has become a form of protest among some NFL players since then the 49er Colin Kaepernick began the movement as a protest against racial injustice and police brutality 2 seasons ago. Why is he not playing? Thursday's incident is believed to be a first by a cheerleader. Quarterback Kaepernick has been without a team since March of last year and has filed a grievance claiming the league's owners have colluded to keep him out of work. Do you think?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Chris Sweeney of Reuters brings us this final offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The man accused of fatally shooting 11 worshippers in a Pittsburgh synagogue during Sabbath prayers pleaded not guilty to federal hate crime charges and other offenses as the city's Jewish community buried 3 more of its dead. Robert Bowers, 46, who had been wounded in a gunfight with police and made his initial court appearance on Monday, shackled to a wheelchair, walked into Thursday's proceeding upright without need of assistance, wearing a red jumpsuit and a bandage on his left arm. He spoke little other than to say he understood the charges and that some of them could lead to the death penalty. Then entered a plea of not guilty to all 44 counts against him, and he also requested a jury trial so that he can make public his manifesto about why we need to have a race war to keep this invasion of microscopic brown people from invading our country with their pestilence and disease. Millions and millions and millions of microscopic Chinese. And microscopic Hispanics. And microscopic, take your pick. Millions of them. In fact, so many, they're going to, according to Trump, build concentration camps along the border to accommodate 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 million people. Trump said that. And this guy's just a foot soldier, isn't he? Well, he appeared sure of foot and exuded a demeanor of confidence, answering questions put to him by U.S. District Judge Robert Mitchell in a clear voice and signing papers with a steady hand. The indictment returned against him on Wednesday includes 11 accounts of obstructing free exercise of religion resulting in death, and 11 counts of using a firearm to commit murder. Following the spate of politically motivated pipe bomb mailings to prominent Democrats, the shooting heightened national tensions days ahead of elections next Tuesday that will decide whether U.S. President Donald Trump will lose the Republican majority he enjoys in both the Congress and the Senate. And Trump also said that these tragedies, and he doesn't really call them tragedies, but they stopped his momentum. He was doing so well, and he egged these people on, and he thought it would be like, a way to fire up the base. And he fired up the base, but the rest of America just hates this guy. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But we will be back on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all weekend. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio throughout the day and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will visit with you right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. près du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.